The phrase unalienable rights is classic natural law language. And the idea is that these rights, these unalienable rights, come from God directly. Now, a right that is unalienable means it cannot be separated from you. It is a part of who you are. It exists for you because you exist. And there is absolutely nothing that anybody can do to remove that right from you. From the Declaration of Independence, we read, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Where do these rights come from? They come from our Creator. They come from God. So Blackstone on unalienable rights said, "Those rights then which God and nature have established and are therefore called natural rights, such as our life and liberty, need not the aid of human laws to be more effectually invested in every man than they are. Neither do they receive any additional strength when declared by the municipal laws to be inviolable. On the contrary, no human legislature has power to abridge or destroy them unless the owner shall himself commit some act that amounts to a forfeiture." So this is just driving home the point that these unalienable rights aren't stronger if some government says that you have them, and they don't disappear if some government says that you don't have them. They're there no matter what. They're not weakened or strengthened by anything that human government can do. Unless, and here's the caveat at the end, we can behave in a way that justifies those rights being removed from us. So in the case of murder, for example, I have the right to my liberty, but if I am a danger to the liberty and life of somebody else, and I've proved that because I killed somebody, then I forfeit some of my liberties. I've not proven that I can handle them appropriately, and so I can be imprisoned and deprived of freedom because I'm using my liberty in a way that infringes on that of another. So there are some exceptions there. There are consequences for our actions, and we can lose privileges. Now, what's really important about this idea of unalienable rights and natural law is that they are founded by something bigger than ourselves, whether that's, you call that natural law, whether that's God, whether that's Allah, or some other higher power. It exists above and outside of the human experience, outside of me, outside of our societies. It's bigger than us. Without that something bigger than us that defines and sets up these unalienable rights and these natural laws, they don't exist. If humanity is the peak of evolution and is the arbiter of all things right and wrong, if there is not something above that or beyond that sets up natural law and sets up right and wrong, then anything is permissible or could be permissible so long as we get enough people to agree to make it a law. We could make murder right. Now, that doesn't make sense to anybody, but even an atheist would say, no, murder's wrong. Well, what makes it wrong? Well, I don't know. It just is. Well, what is that something that says that it is? And you can't argue that. You can't explain that without acknowledging that there is something beyond me, beyond you, beyond us that says that it is. And that thing that says that is God. So all of this is founded in the idea that there is a higher power who sets up some rules that we have to follow. And we know innately inside of ourselves what those right things are and what those wrong things are. And this is exactly why virtually all totalitarians, all dictators, and all tyrants in human history have had to destroy God or control God in religion, at least, if not destroy it completely, because God is a threat to them, because God says that there are rights and laws that are greater than the dictator, that are greater than the tyrant. This is why in communist regimes, the first thing to go is religion. God has to go away. Because if God's not there, there are no higher laws, there are no unalienable rights, and your rights are limited to what the government thinks they should be. And that's why atheism is one of the first tenets of a lot of these totalitarian regimes, because you can't oppress a people who know that they have rights that come beyond the dictator, that come beyond human governments. Another important thing to point out is that there is no such thing as a comprehensive list of unalienable rights. During the ratification conventions of the Constitution, when all the states had taken the work of the founders during the Constitutional Convention and were reading the Constitution, were debating whether their state should adopt it or not, one of the major concerns that many voiced were that there was no list of rights in the Constitution. There was no Bill of Rights. And their concern was, if we don't have this list of rights, then the government can trample on them. Now, those who opposed including a Bill of Rights weren't opposing it on the grounds that there are no rights and these people shouldn't have these rights, but they were really nervous that if we tried to establish a list of what some of these unalienable rights are, that governments or people would come to believe that that list was comprehensive. And so other rights that are out there would be trampled on because, hey, look, it's not on this list, must not be a right, I get to take that from you. Now, their compromise was, tell you what, we'll give you your Bill of Rights. Everyone really, really wants this, but they included in the Ninth Amendment this statement. It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So in other words, if we didn't list a right here, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and the government can't just go trample on that. There were, though, during all the founding era, three main unalienable rights that were spoken of over and over again. And Jefferson, in the Declaration of Independence, talked about some of these. He said, when he was talking about those unalienable rights that we were endowed with, that there are certain unalienable rights that among these, so here's a couple of them, these aren't all of them, but among those unalienable rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are the big three. And a lot has been spoken about what is meant by the pursuit of happiness. And this was clearly understood by the people at the time. Many, many writers listed these three rights in a little bit of a different way. They would say something like life, liberty, and control and ownership of property, or life, liberty, and property. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this idea of property. You might hear that and say like, okay, property, really? So owning stuff, that leads to happiness? I thought I'd been taught that money is, or love of money is the root of all evil, that I can't buy my way into happiness by having stuff. And that's not what's being talked about here. When life, liberty, and property is being talked about, it's not avarice, it's not greed, it's not consumerism that we're talking about. Now, this is a separate principle and it deserves its own chunk of time. So we're going to leave that on the table right now. But just look at what happens when something like communism abolishes property rights. There is something about the control and ownership of property that leads to happiness and prosperity. In communism, you take property away, and the result invariably is not happiness and prosperity, but misery and poverty. And there's a reason for that. We'll get into that a little bit more later in a later principle.